already, but he does look, for all intents and purposes, to be the real deal. And in dispatching Mike Balogun, who we expected it to be the case that he would, with respect to Mike, and in the way he did was very much impressive. But what would you like to see from Moses next if he is to appear? And it seems to be rumored that he'll be appearing on this Usyk versus Dubois bill. Would you like to see that considerable step up, considering the way that he's been dispatching of his opponents, Danny?
Not as considerable a step up as I've seen some people calling for. That was very impressive on Saturday night. The power he was able to generate in the shot that brought the contest to a close, whilst going backwards, is something that you rarely see from fighters at any weight. So a real indication of, it's not just the power, but the technique needed to do that. That is top bracket. Although I think people calling for Hergovic, Bakole, Kabayel next or perhaps getting slightly carried away. I mean, we do need to remember Moses Itauma, he's never been past 6th round. He's never been hit clean on the chin by a heavyweight of any sort of note, and his best win is Dempsey McKean. And with respect to Dempsey McKean, I would pick David Adelaide, Jamie TKV, Fraser Clark, all to beat him. So I think there are a couple of fights needed before we see him in with your sort of top contenders. The names I just mentioned before. We've talked about it a couple of times. I think Jermaine Franklin, it'd be a good fight for him. Jermaine's obviously been the distance with Anthony Joshua, been the distance with Dylan White. And even though he can go late in the fights and you would back Itauma to certainly get some rounds against them, he's not a one punch knockout artist at heavyweight. It wouldn't pose too much of a threat, I don't think, in winning a fight against Itauma, but it's rounds he needs at this stage. You don't want, his first time going, 7, 8, 9, 10 rounds in a fight against a Martin Bakole, a fit Martin Bakole, a Filip Hrgovic, and Ajit Kabayel, which was a name I was really surprised to see people calling for on social media. So, and especially now, this Mike Tyson record, I think, is now officially, unbreakable. I think it was this month was the cutoff point. So there's absolutely no rush at all. And the last thing you want to do is get this kid beat. He's the real hope for British boxing as a whole, with the likes of Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, Chris Eubank Jr. all coming towards the end. He is the one that does have the potential to be a star of similar magnitude, and we don't want to go getting him beat. So I think maybe some cooler heads. It's obviously very impressive what he's doing in the ring. It's the sort of stuff that you can see why people get excited, but I think some of the names I'm seeing mentioned are a bit over the top.
We'll wait and see. I wonder if they might throw in Deontay Wilder against Moses Atama. The interest for Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, certainly, if we're talking about fights that have gone past their sell date, and we're attributing that label to Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, then Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder is certainly one that's the boat has sailed, docked a number of places around the world, and it's stayed there because that doesn't seem to be one that's all that competitive now with Deontay Wilder having had a number of defeats, but he's in what appears to be a run out. And if he doesn't dispatch of Tyler Herndon, I believe his first name is Tyler, but Herndon, then a serious call for him to retire will be made. But if he does and shows that he's got that knockout power still and can deliver that big punch, then Moses is a big step up, I think, for him to not a big step up, sorry, but a big step up in terms of fighters who have got their records. First world champion, he would have fought as well too. I think that might be the fight they look to make. Is that one that excites you?
Doesn't really excite me. I think we all know how that fight would go. This is not the Deontay Wilder of 4 or 5 years ago, and I don't think it does much for a timer. It builds his profile. I don't think it does much else. I don't think he would get rounds against this version of Deontay Wilder. And there's still that risk factor if Wilder does manage to land that right hand, then could spell catastrophe for Moses Tauma, for Francis Warren, for Frank Warren, and it would be a very expensive fight to make. So yeah, it doesn't do much for me. I'd rather see him, get this kid fights that he's going to learn something from that's going to make him a better fighter and will do him more good for the meaningful part of his career, which probably isn't too far away.
How about Pulev? Want to throw that name at you?
I think you're more likely to get some rounds out of Pulev than this version of Wilder, though maybe not that many. I think the names I've mentioned are the ones I'd most likely see. I wouldn't actually be opposed to seeing him. You know, this is something a bit of a bad bug of mine in boxing is fighters can get a couple of wins over sort of international opponents with a bit of name recognition and they're automatically past British level. Like why does blowing Dempsey McKean and Marius Wack out of there in a handful of rounds, take you past British title level? I wouldn't mind seeing him in with the winner of David Adelaide versus Jimmy TKV. I wouldn't mind seeing him in with Fraser Clark. It's not a fight that Dave wants, and it's not a fight that I think would go well. But Dave Allen is a fight he would learn more from than he has in any fight in his career so far. I think Dave would take him more rounds than he's been up to this point. But if we're talking international opponents, which does seem to be the route they're going. They don't seem to have any interest in going down the British route. Jermaine Franklin is one I'd like to see. Dylan White. I mean, I don't think you're getting rounds. It's a profile builder. Joe Joyce, much the same. But yeah, those are the sort of names.
Let me know what you think in the chat. I'm jumping back to you guys before we move on. Chris Essex says, I see Tyson jogging in Morecambe Bay most days. I asked him if he'll come back. He said 2027, not before. That's a long time
Mm.
out the ring. I'm not sure he was being truthful there. Maybe he was. Stuart Powell says, on going out on a loss, it's way better to lose to Usyk than it is to AJ. I'd agree. I just wonder how much of a possibility it is that he loses to Anthony Joshua. Certainly, I see a lot of people changing their mind off of the back of Fury being beaten by Usyk to say that AJ would beat him. I'm not too sure if the gap has been closed off of the back of Fury's defeats. Then the road says, do you remember the British Knights? A conversation with Ian. Not sure what's happening there. Also says, attention seeking, and when he's not a center of attention, he says something to get people talking about him. He's such a child, let him stay retired. New stars like Itauma and Wardley are already emerging. They're already emerging, but they're nowhere near the stardom of Fury or AJ. That's a long, long climb. And those are two fighters who feature on a platform which is growing in the UK and further, but not big enough and not prominent off of those stars who made their names off of platforms like Sky Sports and BT, which is now TNT, and have crossed over into the mainstream, like the BBC and other channels. I would love to see the likes of Itauma and Wardley get onto shows like the Graham Norton show or Jonathan Ross show, whatever it is, and you'd see some of the, both of them. I'm not saying they don't have the capacity to; they probably do. But Tyson Fury and to Joshua, we're talking about those who are genuine stars. Often we're talking about bugbears in boxing, Danny. Often you hear the word superstar in boxing, and maybe in the closed box that is boxing, they are a superstar. But in reality, when it comes to mainstream superstardom, a lot of fighters unfortunately aren't superstars. There are very few of them. Joshua and Fury are them, but likes of Itama and Wardley aren't quite yet, and aren't they are emerging, but there's a long way to go yet to get them there, and we still need the likes of Fury and AJ, I feel, to create big buzz, big nights, because they're few and far between, unfortunately, especially here in the UK.